great pleasure for me this evening to welcome a very good friend to the Isle of Man, Mr. Art Doula. Now, Art is both the founder of Excalibur Almaz, he is their president, and he probably is their chief executive in any other job that gets thrown at him. I had the privilege 2 weeks ago of being in London when Excalibur Almaz was launched at the Royal Aeronautic Society, and believe me, seeing the capsule with the Isle of Man symbol on it in Parliament Square outside the Queen Elizabeth Conference Centre was something to behold. And there was a tremendous amount of interest, both from politicians in Westminster, people from the aeronautical industry themselves, because we're leading up to the Farnborough Air Show now, and also a lot of media worldwide. Now, I'm sure you haven't come here to listen to me speak tonight, so what I'm going to do now is hand you over to the man who has led this project right from the start, the real brains and enthusiasm behind the organisation, Mr. Art Doula.
Hi. Boy, today was a good day, you know. We saw the start of something brand new. And I'd like to ask a few people to come up here just for a few minutes to get recognized. Dave, would you come up here and would you bring with you the people you have inspired to form the Scientific Preparatory Academy for Cosmic Explorers? We have a new beginning of the Scientific Preparatory Academy for Cosmic Explorers. Where it will go from here, I don't know, but I do know it's an Isle of Man organization, and it's dedicated in this first inaugural conference to looking at the barriers that nobody else really wants to discuss at their conferences, the barriers to commercial space development.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Art, for holding this wonderful event for our conference. And I was the spark, but the students responded with all their energy and enthusiasm. And of course, the space, as we call it, is hopefully ultimately a undergraduate university that offers students hands-on experience in actual space projects, technology development or design efforts from the very beginning. And that feeds on my experience at Michigan and Texas A&M, where I've learned that young people, even at the undergraduate level, can contribute very significantly to space projects. After all, for one thing, they don't know what is impossible. I'd like also to thank the Isle of Man government for their support for this conference. And I must say that it's amazing that the leadership of the island conceived this unique notion of providing a haven for space industry. And we have all enjoyed the benevolence of its people who, I'm sure, combine their friendliness with a deep commitment to developing a spacefaring society.
Now, I'm going to take about 5 minutes of your time away from the hors d'oeuvres, if I may. Does this meet with the approval of the consensus here? And I'm going to tell you about our spacecraft. Because you know, just 2 weeks ago, we finally announced what we're really going to do. And what we're really going to do is we're going to equip this spacecraft with a type of electric propulsion called a Hall thruster, probably built by the Busak Corporation just outside of Boston in Massachusetts. And we're going to fly it to the moon on a scientific expedition that will go further than any of the Apollo missions. And we're going to do it privately. And so far, anyway, without any government subsidy. I only point that out because in low Earth orbit, the government subsidies are fairly high at this point. Now, you might say, how can a private company do this? The answer is that we are the heirs to the genius and the fortune of the Soviet Union. The fact is that these spacecraft, the 5 here, the 3 that are the small capsules, have flown to space 9 times and landed successfully 9 times. The big stations have flown in space, not these, because they never come down once they go to space, they stay in space. But some of them have stayed in space for up to 15 years, the core module of the Mir station, or the Zvezda module of the current International Space Station, which is virtually identical to this module over here on my left. We have the opportunity, we have the technical means, and if the Futron Corporation of Washington, D.C., which is well known as being the best econometrics organization in America for space, is correct, we have up to 29 people that will want to fly to the moon or past the moon at a price point of roughly 100 million pounds. And yes, we will accept Isle of Man pounds. Now, we've put about a little over $45 million into this project so far over the last 7 years, and we have never sought publicity. We did show our spacecraft to the children at King William's College, and then we opened up this facility for a single day, and 10,000 people from the Isle of Man came to see it. Now, that either means that they are the nosiest people in the known universe or somebody who's really interested in space. Possibly both. But we're proud to be a MAX company. And I want to tell you right from the beginning, we're not here for the zero tax rate. We appreciate it, but we could have gotten a zero tax rate in many other jurisdictions. We're here because of the foresight of the Isle of Man government in naming Chris Stott as its representative to the space community. I met Chris Stott. I think that he's a wonderful man, and he comes from a wonderful family. And he brought us to the Isle of Man. And his father, Brian Stott, was our first chairman of the board, something that was really done as a courtesy, because he at one point was the chairman of NatWest Bank, has a great deal of business experience. So the Stott family has contributed very greatly to this company. And we're proud to be part of a collection of Vikings that 1,000 years ago decided to settle here. I would make the argument that what we're doing moving into space is not as difficult as what those Vikings did when they settled the Isle of Man. It probably took them months to get here. It probably took and was more dangerous than what we're doing, because we're probably insurable, and I'm sure they were not. We think that it may take us 6 months to a year to form our first expedition. It will be a true scientific expedition in the classical sense of British private scientific expeditions around the world, to Antarctica, to the South Pacific. And we hope that it will help change the British Isles from a seafaring society that has had enormous historical success to being a spacefaring society that will generate new wealth in this new century for all the people of the earth. We wouldn't mind a little bit of it sticking here on the Isle of Man and in Britain. I want you to enjoy yourself. Realize that you're actually around the actual flight hardware that will be used for these missions. And if you look carefully at the second capsule on the right, the green one, it is completely equipped for spaceflight. You can't see all of the equipment because it's covered up by a little blanket. But that has all the electronics in it. The other one has been stripped out because we were doing engineering and non-destructive testing on it in Houston. Behind me is what we believe our first flight capsule will look like. We have a mock-up of the displays and controls, and I encourage you to look at it carefully. From after we form the first expedition, within 24 to 30 months, we will have done all the testing we need to on the expedition members, and we will have gotten their ideas for their bespoke scientific mission, and we will have equipped the station. We will then launch the station and check it out unmanned in Earth orbit, and then within 6 months after that, we'll fly a test flight to qualify all of our new manned systems in our taxicab spacecraft. And then shortly after that, we will fly the first expedition up to the spacecraft. They'll man the spacecraft and take it to the moon. Alternatively, if they didn't want to spend 4 or 5 months doing that trip to the moon, we could send the station to the moon under remote control and then launch them in what's called a Hallman high energy transfer orbit. And in 5 days, they'd be docking. But I'm really not sure that I would like to live for 5 days in this little capsule. I must tell you, it's about the same size inside as an Apollo capsule. The Apollo capsule had 1.5 times this much habitable volume, and it went to the moon. Our big spacecraft has 6 times the habitable volume of the Orion spacecraft, which the United States has put several $billion into at this point. We are more technically ready to fly people into space for long missions than any spacecraft in the world, and that includes all currently operational spacecraft. We are a NASA contractor in the Commercial Crew Program for the last 8 months, and we actually completed a week and a half ago all of the milestones on our NASA contract for Commercial Crew. Doesn't mean we're going to carry Commercial Crew to the space station. What it does mean is that NASA's had a good hard look at our hardware, at our planning, at our concept of operations, right down to the level of how do we measure fault tolerance, how do we take and maintain configuration and data management control for the whole life cycle of our equipment. Now, some people might say that a company that only has 10 or 12 people in it can't possibly do this. I disagree because we have 2 subcontractors. One is EADS Astrium, 17,000 of the best engineers in Europe. They build the Airbus. They built the ATV that has already gone up and docked with the space station. And our hardware we will use from them comes from that ATV program. And in Russia, NPO Machinist Training, 25,000 people in an unparalleled technical space complex that's very little known in the West because most of its contracts are with the Ministry of Defense. But they've been supporting us. I've known them for 20 years, and they've been working on this project for 7. And they are ready to produce to what we call build to print all of the critical equipment for these manned spaceships. Specifically, we have a completely operational and tested emergency escape system. This is something that SpaceX hopes to have in 3 years for $500 million. We have it now. So we're at a higher level of technical readiness than anybody else in the world. Now, somebody mentioned to me a few minutes ago that they were on a cruise ship teaching about astronomy, and somebody came up to him and said, "You're from the Isle of Man. They've just announced they're going to the moon." They got it right. We are going to the moon. I hope you'll all share the experience with us. Thank you.